Okay, good afternoon. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. Today, I'm very pleased to have with me as my guest Mike Brown, who's the Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer at Dexcom, also a former Venture Law Group colleague. Mike, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you, Richard, and good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You've had such an interesting career. Let me start by asking you why you went to law school in the first place.
Well, I'd like to, for people to think I had a great reason, but it was my parents always told me I should be a doctor or a lawyer with the emphasis on a doctor. And I got to college and the pre-med classes were a lot harder than I wanted to study for. So I decided, I guess I'm going to be a lawyer.
Without much further than that, did you ever think about what kind of lawyer or anything like that?
No, it was, what I did do to my credit was I took the LSAT early because I figured, well, if I'm going to be a lawyer, I should figure out if this really is an option. So I studied for that, did well, and so decided that was going to be the career for me. My mother owned a court reporting agency, and so I did have some experience or some connection to the law. And through her agency, I actually would tape record. She had a contract for National Labor Relations Board hearings, and so I was actually able to tape record those and type those. And she also had the bankruptcy court. And so because I had worked with those, I thought maybe I'd be an employment lawyer, or maybe I'd be a bankruptcy lawyer, but really didn't go to law school with my mindset on what type of law I'd practice. And really, even when I went to the law firm, was pretty open. And it started out actually as a real estate lawyer for a year. And that was in the .com era, and the corporate lawyers seemed to be or involved with a lot more exciting transactions. So I asked to switch over to that group, and that's really how I ended up in corporate law.
Did you ever think about being a litigator or from law school or anything like that, or that was never really?
Not really. I mean, I don't thrive on confrontation. I mean, I can deal with it as necessary, but it kind of tires me out if I have to do it all the time. And so, I did gravitate towards transactional law more so than litigation.
I see. So your corporate law, I know you obviously worked in a law firm for a while, and then you went in-house. Tell me about some of the highlights of some of those positions, because I know you've been in a few different places.
Sure. So, what I really liked is as a corporate lawyer, and I grew up as a startup lawyer. And what I really liked about that was the excitement of companies growing quickly. I think that for the most part, or a lot of the startup companies, there's an optimism. They're started by optimistic people, optimistic and energetic people. And so I like to be around those people. And the other part I liked was just as a first or second year lawyer, you were dealing with the decision makers at the company directly. So I'd be talking to the CEO or the CFO and advising them generally. And so from that standpoint, that's really what I always liked, was a relationship with the client and a broad kind of counseling type practice. I liked the actual execution. I always thought was okay, but wasn't my favorite part. It was more just kind of the strategic aspects of deals and the relationships with the companies and the executives.
What made you decide to take your first in-house job? I know you were obviously a corporate lawyer. I know you were at Venture Law Group, so you did the startups. And then your first in-house opportunity, what attracted you and why did you take that?
Just viewed as an opportunity and mentioned that I really like kind of the strategic thinking and assessing both business issues or legal issues that apply to business. And so viewed it going in-house as an opportunity to do more of that from what I was spending my time on, as opposed to that only being part of what I did. It was probably the main driver. You and I also saw, like, for a while, people making a lot of money on the in-house, although that didn't work out well for most people. But there was possibilities of quicker kind of career growth was also part of a factor at that point.
Well, how did you like it when you went in-house? I mean, it was very different. Did it scratch the itch you were hoping to scratch in terms of the strategic and business stuff?
It did. So I've always liked being in house, but I caveat that first and foremost. Like I've always been really fortunate to work with I've always reported to the CEO, and I've worked with great CEOs. And so to me, especially if you're a general counsel, to me that's the most important. I think it's a fantastic job if the relationship there is good, the relationship with the other executives is good, and the relationship with the board is good.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I suspect that it's probably difficult if those relationships aren't great.
Mm-hmm.
But so for me, I've been fortunate, and with that, I really like being in house.
Mm-hmm. Well, what made you decide to go back to a law firm? Because you were in house and you went back to a law firm. This is even before your current position. What attracted you to do that?
Um, it was for a while. I was a part-time general counsel, and so was also doing transactional work on the side, and was also really focused on building out my network,
Mm.
and met a lot of great people, and viewed being at the law firm an opportunity for me to work with a lot of great people and a lot of great companies on a diverse basis as far as what they were working on, sizes of companies, and so it was really that opportunity to do that and build out my legal practice that brought me back to the law firm.
Hmm. How do you compare the two? I mean, you've done both a couple of different times. You've worked at smaller firms like Venture Law Group. You were at, a gigantic firm like DLA Piper. Tell me, contrast and compare some of those different places for me.
Yeah, very, as you mentioned, very different. Yeah, it was. Um, you learn about conflicts of interest at the
Mm-hmm.
bigger law firms. At Venture Law Group, that was pretty rare where we would have ran into a conflict. Whereas the bigger law firms, you see that. I've been fortunate in that I view all of the law firms that I've been at to be entrepreneurial, and so even the bigger law firm like a DLA, my time there really was. I would say at each of those places, it was the practice that I built with partners that worked with me alongside me, and each of those environments allowed me that opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I went from smaller, yes, from a very small firm to a medium-sized firm to a large firm, and a lot that was really driven by my clients kept getting bigger and bigger as far as, and that was just relationally driven.
Mm-hmm.
The Before I joined it, Dexcom was my biggest client, and so being at a place like DLA Piper, DLA was able to do a whole bunch of different types of work for a global company like Dexcom, whereas the smaller law firms were a little bit more niche. Would do the M&A work, the IPO work, the corporate work, but not regulatory work, not help companies on a global basis. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I went from smaller to bigger, but I enjoy my time at all of them.
How do you compare like the skills necessary to be successful law firm versus in-house? I mean, they're obviously different, but how would you describe the differences?
Um, I think there's different paths to success. Um, Probably more so in a law firm than at companies, but um, for me, my success was driven relationally and from a client generation and relationship standpoint, as opposed to, and I would say kind of, I mentioned really liked working at Venture Law Group and the startups because I really, towards the end of my career at DLA, I actually would describe myself as an outside general counsel for companies more so than what had been my core areas of expertise, which were venture capital financings, private equity financings, and M&A.
Mm-hmm.
I even on those types of transactions, I usually brought in people to support me, so I'd be involved, but I wouldn't necessarily be leading it. So for me, success was relationally driven and client relationship driven. There is a path to success for people that are really good technically and really proficient at execution of various types of transactions. I would say that there's less of that in-house as far as kind of just the pure purely executing. It is much more big picture, relationally driven with the different functions that you serve, and having a diversity of problems that you're solving.
Hmm. After having done both, and putting major, I mean, I know few lawyers who have probably had as much experience in both. I mean, you see, like some people have just a little bit of law firm and then a lot of in-house, or maybe it's vice versa. What do you find yourself kind of preferring one to the other, or do you find that you like to go back and forth so every few years you can kind of change hats again, or what do you find yourself?
I, I I think I have a slight preference to in-house. I've enjoyed both. Again, with the caveat that the relationship with the executive team's really strong. If that's the case, I do like being in-house better, but I like being at law firms as well. I had been at a law firm about 13 years before joining Dexcom, and some of it was just, um, yeah, Dexcom is a fantastic company. I did view it as I wasn't going to likely have an opportunity to be the CLO at a company as big as Dexcom, because they were my biggest client, and so I kind of viewed it, if I was going to make the switch, this was the switch for me to make. And then, but some of it too is just was I thought, well, it'd be neat to do that again for just the sake of doing something different than what I'd been doing for the 13 years previously to that.
Well, was it hard switching back to being in-house? I mean, you've been in private practice recently, pretty long time actually.
Yeah.
Was it hard kind of switching back and just doing one client's worth of work, and having maybe a lot more thorny business issues that you're a little more insulated from on the law firm side?
I wouldn't say it was difficult, as I mentioned. At the end of my career at the law firm, I really viewed myself as outside general counsel. I mean, I did still have a learning curve, primarily being I had supported a number of medical device, med tech companies, but being in-house and being on the executive team, it's a whole nother level of understanding. And so I'm still learning, about the industry, and I kind of believe I will on a continual basis for the rest of my career. But so that's been the biggest challenge, but I've enjoyed that challenge, and it's been interesting and continues to be so.
Which do you find more stressful? Or maybe I should ask, in what way are the stresses different?
Um, yeah, I view, for me at least, I viewed law firm as slightly more stressful,
Uh-huh.
mainly because I felt like my priorities were more often split. For every one of my clients, that their matters were the most important thing to them, and I treated all of my clients as really important, but there would be competing interests.
Mhm.
Here, in theory, I could have, but like, it's really just it's one client, and so
Mhm.
it takes that tension out, and so that's the main reason why I say it's less stressful to be
Mhm.
at a company. I could imagine. I mean, I there could be circumstances where, if things, certain issues arose or what have you, then I might change my mind. But
Well,
I've been
I
fortunate
mean,
not to have.
fortunately, you're not running a commercial bank or anything.
Perfect. Exactly.
What, I mean, tell me a little bit about, I mean, law firm partners frequently, in-house lawyers, when they go into law firms, frequently find that, that in-house experience really helps them be a better lawyer. But tell me, I mean, or do you think being a lawyer, outside law firm partner, also helps you be a better general counsel? Comment on that a little bit.
I do. I mean, so I do think it depends a lot on what type of law and what type of clients you're working with at the law firm. But um, I mean, really everything I did at the law firm, because again, and that I do think is a little bit unique maybe to a startup practice, whereas a first or second year lawyer, you're really working with the most senior executives, as opposed to, if you only work on huge transactions all the time, as an example, and you have a small piece of that transaction. So everything I've ever did in the law firm, I think, did prepare me well for this, both from a experience standpoint, and then, I think that I think relationships are important across, in the law firm. relationships with your colleagues and it's relationships with clients. You know, in-house it's relationship with your colleagues, and so yeah, I think you grow relationally as you practice, and so that's been directly applicable to in-house.
Do you find that you delegate more now and do more managing as opposed to legal work than you as a lawyer or law firm partner, or do you find yourself actually doing more of the legal work now than you did as a law firm partner?
You know, so I'm pretty blessed. I mean, we have a good sized team here. I would say for much of my career, I delegated less. For the last handful of years before I went in house, I was delegating a lot. And so from that standpoint, still though, even in house, I'm delegating more. I I have less deliverables, you know, on like a drafting of a contract or reviewing something start to finish in house than I did at the law firm. And so from that standpoint, definitely delegating more. You know, a big difference for me, you know, as the CLO is management. I mean, in the law firm, I really was nobody's boss. Yeah, there was. You could say there would be associates that worked for me more than other people or what have you, but you know, I was an influencer of careers and what have you, but you know, here I am, the ultimate decision maker. That's been maybe the biggest change is really just kind of being a manager of a big group versus before, you know, having people I worked with consistently, but really being more of an influencer than a manager.
How big is your legal team there now?
We're about 55 people.
No, that is pretty big. Do you find yourself doing a lot of mentoring, and is that something you enjoy doing?
Yeah, I've mentored all the way through my career. I've done it mainly, I guess, first and foremost, because it's always felt like the right thing to do. But I've also gotten a lot out of it. I have this job in a lot of ways because of mentoring that I did. Somebody that I mentored was my predecessor here, and so he brought me in to support Dexcom for a long time, and recommended that I replace him when he left. And so, yeah, it wasn't my intent, but you know, from a career perspective, actually, as I was doing the mentoring, actually paid off handsomely for me. And I had other examples of that. I mean, another example is somebody I mentored actually went out and started a successful tech company. And they actually came to me. They had an entrepreneurial bug. They told me, hey, I really want to do something entrepreneurial. I'm going to start my own law firm. And I had already had my own law firm at one point. I said, yeah, it's not really, it's kind of entrepreneurial, but you're not inventing a new way to practice law. Like, I don't think it's the best thing for you to do. If you're going to be entrepreneurial, go start a tech company. Anyway, they've started, he started a very successful company. They were a client of mine at DLA. And so, you know, also paid off from a business standpoint, having them as a client. You know, other example, I mean, somebody else I mentored at two prior firms. They followed me from straddling to DLA, and then from DLA to Dexcom, and it's definitely something I've done a lot of. But without my motivations, I've gotten a lot. Being what's in it for me, I've gotten a lot out of doing it. So
interesting. So, Mike, you've been partners at big law firms. You've been general counsels of public companies and private companies. Do you see yourself ever doing something else, a venture capitalist, or maybe like a pure business role? Do you have fantasies or visions of doing something like that, something completely different than what you've done?
I for a lot of my career, I did. You know, it probably would have been to start a tech company, be a venture capitalist. I don't as much right now. Yeah, I still have a lot to learn about, you know, the med tech industry, and so I'd say I'm really happy with where I am, but yeah, who knows as time goes on if that might change.
Yeah. Well, Mike, it's been wonderful chatting with you. It's great to catch up with you after 20 years of being at the same firm. If you do decide to do something else, please come back and tell me about it.
Absolutely. Will do, Richard.
This is Richard Hsu and Mike Brown. Thanks.